Welcome to another episode of Comics and Sweet Tea. We got an awesome episode planned for you guys. We got a double whammy, double feature, guys. You're gonna love it. If you're new to the show, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Be sure and tell your friends about the show. Um, Here in the description, I'll have all the links for these two awesome guests that I'm going to be bringing on here in just a few. If you've got any questions for any of us, be sure and drop those in the comments and we will get you an answer. I always said I wanted to do this show where it's kind of like when if I ever got to sit down with my favorite creator of all time, I would ask these questions. So, I'm kind of like coming at it from the audience's angle. So, but hey, you got your own personal questions. Be sure if you want to know, throw them in there and we'll get to you. Join the conversation, you guys. All right. Hey, give us a thumbs up, drop a comment, got all that out of the way. I'm going to shut up rambling and bring in these two awesome guests. We got Jay Louder coming back. We're talking about Brandon DePillis's uh It's a Horror Show, The Early Bird. Hey, without further ado, here these two awesome creators are. I'm gonna shut the hell up and let them talk. And here they are. These two beautiful individuals.
Thanks for having us on, Jerry.
Thanks,
Oh,
Jerry.
it's
Appreciate it.
always a pleasure, guys. So, hey, man, we've talked about a lot of things before we actually kick this thing off. We'll probably get into a little bit of that. I think we pretty much got our whining and our groaning out of the way about certain platforms that shall remain nameless right this minute, but we will bring them back up. Brandon, let's get right into this. The birth of the early bird. Kind of take us through. Jade actually brought this project up during his show a little while ago, but he didn't go into details. He didn't spill any of the beans. Hey, you tell us what you want us to know. We don't want to spoil anything, but kind of set us on the journey of the birth of the early bird.
All right. The Early Bird is one of several horror stories that I have. I've written a bunch of horror stories that I've had in my back pocket for a while, and I've been wanting to insert them in between my Cannonball books, All the Lies and Cannonball, which are more family-friendly oriented things. Um, the Early Bird is one of these stories that I've had in my back pocket. It's a ice fishing horror story. It's a one-shot. It is Tremors on Ice is a good way I like to describe it.
I love it,
Um,
man.
yeah, I always thought ice fishing is I love horror stories taking place on ice, like The Thing, one of my favorite horror movies.
Awesome movie.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and I mean it's just such a good setting. It's cold, and it's
yeah.
everything's blue, and that's like one of the tones I'll have in the story. Um, and I always love the idea of Creep Show and Tales from the Crypt, those one-shot stories. And there's a lot of influence from actually a Creep Show story. I don't know if you remember the movie. It was also a short comic from the Creep Show, the one that takes place in the lake on the pontoon in the middle of the lake.
Remember it well.
Yeah,
Me and Jade actually talked about Creep Show. Yeah.
We did, yeah.
yeah. So that story was like one of my favorite from Creep Show, and it's like, that's a big inspiration. Aliens is a big inspiration for me personally. Aliens is an inspiration also, but Alien because I love the horror
Alien
aspect of
doesn't
the
give us
alien.
credit. Both of them are extraordinary
Both of them are
movies.
amazing.
Everybody always mentions aliens. Nobody ever talks about Alien.
Alien's a horror movie. It's a haunted house movie. It's a horror movie.
Yes.
Aliens is an action movie. So I love them both, but Alien is like when if you have to pick one, Alien is mine. Like I love Ridley Scott. Nothing against James Cameron, but I love Ridley Scott.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's a straight up horror comic, one shot, and I had the idea and I was going to put it under Cannonball Presents, and I'm like, even my wife was saying, this is too scary for Cannonball. You want Cannonball to stay more family friendly. You don't want people to be confused about it. And then
Right.
I saw Jade, was about to launch It's a Horror Show, and I was like, dude. And then he came back to me with the idea of It's a Horror Show Presents, and I was just like, dude. And we were both like, dude.
Yeah, dude moment. Yeah.
Exactly. It was awesome. I mean, it's just such a great idea that he's opening up his brand to other creators to let us, introduce us as horror creators. And I think I love Jade's books. I absolutely love it. He does one of my favorite shorts is The Babysitters, and that's It's a Horror Show 1. It is called The Babysitter, right, Jade?
Yeah, it is.
And that's like one of my favorite short horror comics. It's got a great twist, great pacing, beautiful drawings. It's so freaking cool, and I'm just so proud to be a part of It's a Horror Show now. And I just think there it is.
I just got new books sent to me today from Mark, because I did free comic book day and I sold out of like everything. And I'm about to do it, which is great. Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah,
but I know that
sell out a lot.
A little bit. I mean, I don't get a whole I don't get a huge print run ever. But yeah, The Babysitter.
I loved it.
There it is.
It's so great. And Jade's got such great lines. His inking, he's got beautiful dark lines.
Yeah. You
so much weight.
I mean, you're cutting yourself short there, buddy. I mean, I love your perspectives.
Oh, thank you.
That skewered kind of perspective that you throw on certain things. I love that. That's what first kind of brought me to your work. Jade was those big, beautiful, bold lines.
Oh God, yeah.
And kind of a classy, cartoony style, but he was doing this weird, campy kind of horror. I mean, both of you. Yeah,
I know.
I love both of his work.
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate it. And we love your work too, Jerry. We're just having a big old love fest here.
You're making me laugh.
I mean, we all kind of fall. All three of us are in the horror genre, actually.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So Brandon came to me with this idea of the early bird, and he was just like, I don't want to put it under my own thing, and I totally got that. And we're gonna do we're doing an anthology for It's a Horror Show that is open right now, taking submissions, so folks can create a 1 to 6 page
how long
short
is
story.
this open, dude? Because I'm thinking about throwing my hat in the ring.
You should, man. You totally should. It is open until July 31st.
Oh, so I'm definitely throwing my hat in the ring.
Plenty of time.
Nice. I've got something I've been sitting on.
Love it. The only theme is campy horror. That's it. It's pretty much wide open. You can submit through the Lesser Known Comics website, or the easiest way is I have a link in my link tree that's connected to my Instagram. It's the easiest way to find all that stuff. So we're doing that, and we're doing that anthology. So that's like was going to be the first time that we kind of allowed different creators to kind of use the It's a Horror Show brand and to be a part of that world. And then Brandon was like, "Oh, I'm going to put the story as part of the anthology." And then he was like, "Actually, I think it's going to be too long." He was like, "I think it's going to end up being like a full book."
Confused, 28 pages.
Yeah. And so he's just like, "What do you think if we did something a little different?" And so we kind of like threw some ideas back and forth, and we came up with this idea of doing It's a Horror Show Presents. So it's part of the same kind of universe as It's a Horror Show, but it's not necessarily taking place with any of my characters or stories and whatnot. But it's a moment to allow different artists to come in, use the name, the brand of It's a Horror Show, and then have their own stories be a part of that. So Brandon pitched the early bird, and I mean, you heard the pitch, the ice fishing and the connection to Alien and things.
You talked about that. You told me the angle. Yeah, that's all he told me, Brandon, and that was it. He said ice fishing. I said, for Brandon, that's fucking perfect.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, now Brandon's is going to be the first one for this idea. We've got already a couple in the tank. I haven't really been talking about it, but there's a couple other creators that came forward and like, yeah, now we have a longer story, and so I don't know if we're going to try and like pack those into 2024 or if that's going to be like early 2025 or if we're just going to say fuck it and just we'll just put them out. Who knows? But yeah, there's lots of It's a Horror Show coming down the pipe for this year.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's incredible, man. Incredible. And I loved what you were talking about possibly doing with the anthology, kind of like the Vincent Price type thing where
yeah.
that's I gotta love it. I can't say how much, man. I mean, it's just outstanding.
I'm super excited to see how it all comes together. I've started seeing some of the submissions for that as they come in. I'm working with Brandon Blocksdorf of Apollo City Comics and Comics Wellspring now on that project, and he's kind of taking on the editor role. He kind of told me, he's like, yeah, don't look at any of them until like we close, and I'm like, you can't. No, there's no way. Because I gotta
That's like putting your Christmas presents in front of him and say, hey, don't fucking look at them till Christmas.
And I'm like, no way.
They're not wrapped. But you don't look at them.
And there's some fun ones. There's some cool stuff coming in. So far, a lot of really short ones, but I think like some of the longer, bigger ideas. I've been when we first put out the idea, I just my phone lit up with people hitting me up and being like, oh, I've got this idea, and what do you think would this work, and and all that kind of stuff. So I know that there's a bunch that I haven't seen yet that are going to be coming through that I'm super excited about. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really cool thing to see what everybody comes up with. Yeah, I'm super looking forward to it. And then the way we're going to tie it in with kind of doing the Vincent Price, but so the angle I'm going to do is we're going to do it kind of like a found footage horror film. And so I'm going to kind of create a couple of pages that are going to be like interlude pages that will tie stories into each other. It's going to be my monstrous band. So from the date, so Mr. Hyde, the werewolf, the Wendigo, and Chad are going to be showing up to an abandoned comic book shop, the abandoned lesser known comic book shop.
Perfect,
and they're going to get some sort of kind of creepy invitation to go there, and when they're there, they're going to find like a long box full of abandoned comics, and each comic they pull out is going to be one of these short stories that people are submitting.
That's awesome.
And I think it's going to be a really fun way to like tie it in, and we're going to do it as like depending on how many obviously we get, but the plan is to do it as a perfect bound book, which I think is going to be really cool. So we have the pages to do something exciting and make it really fun and beautiful, to do like really cool packaging for that, and just really ham it up. And I think that it's going to be super cool when it comes out. I can't wait to kind of get started on that. Too many projects before I can even think about it and touch it, but
so awesome.
I think it's going to be awesome once we finally roll that out. Yeah.
And that anthology is what inspired me to actually sit down and, start drawing the early bird. And like you said, and I was, the first time I heard Jade talking about it, the anthology, I was just like, I got to be a part of this. And I kept writing, and then I didn't stop writing. But it's good. Now I get to be a part of It's a Horror Show. Anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, when he brought it up, I was like, oh, should I? I don't know. He probably don't want to deal with my shit. He's got enough on his plate. But yeah, the more I think about it, everybody's jumping in. I'm like, fuck it, man. I'm all in. Yeah,
you totally should. You totally should.
Because I mean, me and Jay went in real detail. We went back. We talked about the Laurel and the Hardy, and Universal Monsters, and I mean, I love those old horror movies. Just those old campy style. I mean, they're classics, man. They're hard to find nowadays, but oh my god, they're just they're gorgeous. They
You know,
are.
I was
Yeah.
watching a bunch of 50s horror movies, can't be horror movies, monster movies, while making Auto Eyes, because I was trying to get in the mode of doing like
Getting the
I was
headspace. Yeah.
yeah, I was watching The Blob,
Oh wow.
So
It Came
good.
from Outer Space,
Mm-hmm.
or is it called It Came from Outer Space, which is, or The Thing from Outer Space, which is
I
the
think it's the
original The
thing
Thing.
from outer space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With all the doors closing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, and that, I mean, it was fantastic. That was like one of the best ones out of all of them. There was like one from It Came from Beneath the Sea, or It Came from Beneath the Sea. There's a lot of It Came from Somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And there
Right.
was like The Man from Venus. There's like all these, like Tubi has them. If you watch if you can go on Tubi, or the other one that's free. You can catch a lot of them on there. And it just kept, like, as I was drawing, like they're only like 50. An hour and 10 minutes, sometimes an hour and 20
Yeah.
minutes. And like, you're just drawing and you're like finishing up a panel and the next one just starts. And I'm just like, oh, what's this? You know, and some of them are so bad, you know, but yeah, I kind of love that.
They're
I
so bad they're
really got a
good.
hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, there's some that I think that like were so creative that like they were almost like too ahead of their time, like when they came out. And I think they've swung around to being like, oh, this is actually really good and relevant and whatnot. But at the time, they were like, what is this? and I think that like that was a problem with a lot of those movies in the 50s and 60s. But I mean, yeah, like they're gorgeous to watch, the way that they're lit, all those movies and stuff like that. Anytime that you watch one of those old horror movies and they do the day to night filter, and it's just like, oh, it's just, you know, slightly darker, but like it looks, but there's shadows,
Yeah.
and it's just, and you're like, okay, you know, we're in for a treat.
Right. And I tell you, you know, one thing that kind of opened me up to all that, and I never knew this, you know, like now to do the black and white, like I don't know if you guys watched the making of WandaVision, but how they had to go in there and they wear the blues and they had to paint the certain colors just to get the right effect and make it look that way was just, it blew my mind, man. The love and attention to detail that Max Shatman, I believe it's Shackman, took with that series, and it's just incredible stuff, man.
Oh yeah, they used to have to. I can't remember what color was it. Like green lipstick they had to put on, so it looked like red
Yeah,
lipstick when
yeah.
shooting
So
black
it
and
would
white.
show up right. Yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of that stuff is really interesting. What they had to do for, just any makeup at all, even just regular makeup, just make them look
right.
normal.
Yeah, to make it read on the black and white scale, totally.
Yeah,
And I think
get to
I think
show up.
that's seeing any of those behind the scenes, you know, images and stuff like that, and hearing talk is really cool, and it makes you think a lot about like color theory and whatnot, of just how things are saturated in different ways, which is
Right.
it's so fascinating. I love that stuff. But yeah, like even those cheesy black and white movies, you're like, man, they must have made this on a shoestring budget. It's like, yeah, but they were like craftsmen. They knew what they were
They
doing
put
in so
so
many
much
ways.
heart and so yeah.
And even the stuff that feels like it's just thrown together, it's like it isn't. It's totally not. Like you know, we get so spoiled now because I think it's cheaper to make stuff that that looks like incredible. You know, that really is illusionistic, and is, the whole idea is to fool you into believing that this stuff is real. And in the 50s and 60s, they were employing so many techniques that didn't always pan out. But now we look at them as nostalgic, and when it's messed up and it's not perfect, for us, that's so much better. And we're like, oh, I
Oh
love
God.
it. I love it because
Yeah.
they're not perfect. But at the time, that stuff was like, that was the technique, you know, like forced perspective of like putting your giant monster really close to the screen, you know. It's like, oh, there's a giant hand, and it's like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And but that was like cutting edge at the time of just like doing those split focus, and that kind of stuff. And the creativity that those filmmakers had, it's just amazing.
Sorry.
So cool.
Yeah. And I tell you, I think we're really kind of seeing we've talked about the renaissance of indie. You're really kind of seeing a renaissance of practical effects in movie making in
You
general
are.
that
Yeah.
I just absolutely love. They found a way. I mean, if you do it right, but if you take certain aspects of the CGI and certain aspects of the practical effects and it, get it just right, it's a perfect marriage. And you wind up with something that looks, you absolutely buy it, because it looks like something you could actually touch. The mind reads it as
Totally.
real, because there are real things in there, and I love what they're doing with it, and I love that they're getting away from some of the CGI and putting some of these practical effects individuals back to work, because it's a
Mhm.
beautiful craft.
It is.
I I love to go. Um, the documentary on Star Wars. I know both you guys have seen it. I watch that thing at least once a month. I just absolutely love all the things that went into making those movies, man. I mean, nobody else is just like you said. Nobody else was doing this at the time, and they
Mhm.
had to create the technology to actually make it. They're one of the reasons why CGI is kind of taken over. They created this
Yeah.
monster. Lucasfilm created it,
Yeah.
Did
and
you ever
they
Totally.
pretty
see?
much made their own self obsolete.
Did you? I'm sure it's in that documentary. Did you see the paintings of the backgrounds of like the long shots in Star Wars?
Gorgeous,
Mhm.
man.
Did you ever?
Gorgeous.
Did you see him, the guy painting them? I can't remember his name now.
I know who
My
you're talking about, but
God,
I can't think of it either.
the long shots of all the troopers and the ship landing, like
Yeah.
just absolutely extraordinary. Like, how did he do that? Like the detail and the griminess. It's mind blowing what they did
And
with the
it
first
looks
Star
real.
Wars.
That's the
Yeah,
crazy thing about it. It looks real.
but that's why Favreau for like the new series, him and Dave Filoni, they'll use like Grogu as a puppet. It's
Yeah.
just like they can do all this other stuff in the background, but Grogu in the Mandalorian is a puppet, and you're like, that's kind of awesome. If you don't, even if
Yeah.
you don't like the shows, that's kind of awesome.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. I
You
think. Oh,
mentioned,
sorry.
sorry, you mentioned the murals. They're actually the director and the makers of I think it's Skeleton Crew, the new Star Wars show that will be coming out later this year. They're going to be using them. They've
Really,
actually got some. Yeah, they're
Mm.
bringing back
that's
some of the
awesome.
murals. He loves the practical effects.
Yes,
They're bringing back a lot of old school stuff that hasn't been used in years, and the murals was one of them.
that's awesome.
It was.
That's
It
such
was.
a
Ralph McQuarrie was
okay.
the
Yes,
guy. So he was the one that did all like the concept art, and then he worked
right.
on the film past that. He's the one that like when they did the concept art for like Chewie, he's got like big ears and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah. He looks extremely alien.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, I love when they make homage to those the classic ways of doing things, and I think that I think the folks who are kind of in charge of the Star Wars now get like what we love so much
Hmm.
about them in the first place, and about those kinds of movies. And I think it's the same thing. Did y'all see Godzilla minus one?
I have not seen
I've
it
heard
yet.
nothing but good
You,
things.
I
you need to
know.
remedy that. Watch that movie. It was. I've never cried at a Godzilla movie. Bawled my eyes out. It
I've
was
Really?
heard it's
so
incredible.
good. Like most of the time on screen, in a Godzilla movie, you're like, I want more screen time for Godzilla. That's always the complaint. It's like more screen time for Godzilla. That's what you want. But in this movie, you're like, less, please, because every time that he's on screen, you're like your anxiety goes up because you're like,
Wow.
bad shit is gonna happen. But like they if you see the comparisons and whatnot, because it won the Oscar for best visual effects this year.
Right.
um, and if you saw the comparison to like the other movies that were up for that category and the budgets that they had, Godzilla minus one was created by Toho, the Japanese company that created
That
Godzilla in the
bird.
first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And their budget was so small, it like in comparison. I can't remember what it was, but it's something crazy like 6 million, right around there. And all the other movies that were up for that category were 50 million, 100 million,
Yeah.
budgets behind those projects. And
Yeah, I
they
want to
just,
say it
and
was
you
between
can feel,
$5 and $7 million, something
yeah.
like that. Some crazy
And
number.
this movie just looks so much better, and it's because they returned to form and did so many of the original methods, but then
Right.
use CGI to kind of like fill in the gaps. And I'm like, that's how it should be used.
Yeah.
It shouldn't it's a technology that is not competent enough to carry a movie, but it can fill in those gaps. Like I think George Miller and the Mad Max, latest two movie, the new one, which I'm so
Yeah.
excited to see. But Fury
Yeah.
Road is a
Same
perfect
here.
example of practical effects.
The marriage.
Fill in the
Yeah.
gap. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm in the same bus with you, man. I can't wait for Fury Road, man.
It's everything about it looks so. It looks so good and so of that world, and I love it.
Yeah. They're actually. I read something just the other day. I forget who it was, but they were interviewing Miller, and he's talking about going back and kind of doing um a prequel story with Mad Max now. He's not going back to like it's going to be set somewhere between the original three and somewhere in there. It's just a lone adventure of Mad Max.
Didn't it? Isn't
I'm
wait?
into it.
Didn't he say that like the Tom Hardy character in Furiosa was
It's not the same
not
one.
the original Mad Max?
Yeah.
Really, I didn't know that.
Somebody,
he has said that. I
Yeah.
saw a crazy theory
Wild
that
Child.
he's the wild child from
Holy
Road
shit!
Warrior. That's who it is because he doesn't like talking, and he's got what's the name of the Interceptor? No, is it the Interceptor? Is that the name of the
Yeah,
car?
I think the
Yeah.
car.
Interceptor.
Yeah.
And he's got the car, but at the end of Road Warrior, Mad Max does not have that car.
No,
The little kid doesn't he? Or at the end of the second one, maybe.
I
don't
want to
remember.
think it was into two. Yeah, that he lost the car.
Yeah, I mean,
But
yeah,
then
he loses it
I
later
can't.
on
I
there.
haven't watched those movies in a while, so I can't remember.
Me either. It's been years since I watched Road Warriors or Thunderdome.
Yeah, I've always been more of a Road Warrior fan than Thunderdome.
Me too.
Because
Me too. Thunderdome.
Thunderdome felt like
It's a hard watch for me. I mean, I loved it when it first came out. Don't get me wrong, but I've always been a Road Warrior fan. The first one, the original Mad Max, is hard for me to watch.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
nothing to do with acting or anything. Just what happened to his family. I don't like watching shit like that. It's just
I totally get it.
yeah.
But it's all. I don't know. I thought it was really hard because of the '70s indies aesthetic that it had, where it was kind of.
I actually like that.
I know. Usually, there's a lot of indie that
Yeah.
I love indie film, but for some reason that one. What was it about
You're
it
right.
that I had to stop
It has
watching?
some
It was
weird cuts. It really
there
does.
was there was a lot of.
It
was rough. It was like the first Evil
sometimes.
Dead
I mean,
movie
you get
where
pure
it was
Disney.
really rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think there was a lot of the filmmaking in that one was just like it was not up to par yet. I think he was trying a lot of stuff, and then he gets to Road Warrior, and the thing is just knocks it out of the park. And he takes these ideas that he first kind of introduces, and I mean, I think that if you're a fan of Mad Max, yeah, you should go back and rewatch the first one. But I honestly think if you're just like, but I want the post-apocalyptic, just start at Road Warrior. Unless you're a super fan, you don't really need to go back. Start at Road Warrior and then keep going.
Road Warrior is what really cemented that character in pop culture. I mean, nobody really knew what Mad Max was. As far they thought Road Warrior was the original movie for a long time. A lot of people, I know I did, and then I want to say it was the when they did a re-release of Mad Max in the maybe early '90s, maybe where they did it with the Mel Gibson, where he actually did his own voice because originally it was dubbed.
Yeah.
Was
You
it?
know, and yeah, it was dubbed. Mel didn't even do his own voice. Um, that they brought him back in and let him that they cut out the dub and actually used Mel's own voice for the movie. I remember watching that one and I was like, wow, this is cool and all, but I mean it's a little much. I'd rather had just watched Road Warriors.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. Um, I think that like the kind of post-apocalyptic angle and stuff like that is such a part like is so important to that character and that
Yeah.
whole thing, and then to have like the original Mad Max not be really set in that timeline like before the nuclear war, like the fallout and stuff like that, it just kind of like ruins the whole setting, and you're like, wait, what the hell
Yeah.
am I watching? You
It's
know?
jarring, yeah. It just
Yeah.
totally takes you out of it.
Hmm. Totally. Um, yeah, I don't even know how we got onto talking about Road Warrior.
That's one thing I love about this though.
Movies. I think we're
Man,
talking movies.
we talk Saturday morning cartoons, breakfast cereal, and then
Yeah.
now we can add Mad Max to the list. I mean, we
Yeah. And I mean, you know, my last hill that I'll die on about Mad Max is that in Fury Road, it was like Miller took everything that the fans had been wanting for Mad Max and just was like, here it is. Here's all
yeah,
of it.
we went
And
crazy
just
with it. Yeah,
let's like really ramp it up. And there was like the kind of like the crazy religious fervor of like the witness me and you know the war
yeah,
boys, and I was like this, you know, it adds like another layer to the whole mythos of Mad Max, and then
right.
the Furiosa and like the caravan stuff. I was like this is awesome. Like
Oh, it
it
was
just takes
amazing.
everything that was already so cool about that franchise and really just like cranked it up. Like
Oh yeah,
the
definitely.
guitar guy that's like on
Oh, that was the
that
I
best.
will
rig that's
never
just
forget
amps.
that. That was just classic, man.
So cool. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because that's exactly what you're going to have when you got your own warrior type post apocalyptic entourage. You got to have your guitar guy
Gotta
riding
have the
around.
music. You do.
You got, yeah, do your soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Oh, sorry. Go for it, Brandon.
I was just gonna say it's funny how Fury Road, like we were saying about like the new Star Wars going back to the old stuff, and how Fury Road is very reminiscent of those earlier of the earlier Mad Maxes, and it just it made me think about like all the stuff that we came across in movies in the 80s and 70s of that aesthetic, and how a lot of the stuff that were maybe what the hell am I trying to say?
Kind of
I lost my train of
influences,
thought.
maybe.
Yeah, the influences
Yeah.
are being seen now from that aesthetic from the 80s and the 70s. That you know, I like me personally, I was a big Evil Dead fan, big
Oh God,
80s
yeah.
slasher fans, and yes, I love the Mad Max movies and all the Star Wars movies, and how all of these things have such an effect on all of us, even just in indie comics or just comics and
Right.
storytelling in general now. Um, it's almost feels like we're going back to that grittier time,
Yeah.
you know.
We're doing that with comics.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, we're taking it back to its roots. I mean,
Mhm.
comics are here, and you guys can feel totally different. But here's kind of my take on it, and a lot of the people that I've talked to kind of feel the same way. It's become kind of an airbrushed type cookie cutter style, and I mean, nobody. I will say this: there are a few rare standouts, Jorge Jimenez being one of them, that kind of break the mold, but everything else kind of looks the same, you know.
Yeah.
And we're kind of taking the things that we grew up with and the stories that we grew up with, and we're fashioning them into comics,
Yeah.
and using a lot of the old traditional styles. And people are tired of looking at all this cookie cutter spray painted bullshit.
Yeah.
I know I am.
And I don't know when that trend really started,
I don't
because if
understand
you
where
look at
that
like
comes from. It just kind of
if you look at
happened.
like the 90s and whatnot, you had these rock stars for
Yeah.
Marvel and for DC who had their own totally individual style. Like, yeah, sure, there's crossover and stuff like that, but it was
Right.
very different. You could delineate between McFarlane and
Oh yeah.
Lee or whoever, right? And then now, like, yeah, you look at the company guys who are the total jobbers, right? They're getting hired to come in and do, like, yeah, you're going to do issues 6,028 of Daredevil, and
Yeah.
then you're going to jump on to the however many titles of Spider-Man they're currently running. Like, there's at least 15 different Spider-Man titles out on the racks right now, and you're going to jump in and do filler art on that one, and it's just like, yeah, and then the art becomes very just monotonous, and it has to be just a product of like market research that they want, like this, that fans want this polished stuff. But I firmly am on the other side of that. I'm like, man, I don't know if I see a new big 2 book and that's the way it looks, like, I'm not even picking that thing up.
It's a stifling of creativity. It's the money stifling creativity. That's what I'm talking about with like the slasher films and the original Star Wars, and how they, and even something like Jaws or the Mad Max films, and how they had to use practical stuff and to create the aesthetic that they did, because they had to be more creative in what they did.
Right.
As indie creators, we have to be more creative in how we present ourselves and our stories. When I started doing comics, I started drawing in 2010 again, and I didn't start putting out my stuff until a few years ago. And when I did that, I said I'm never going to be the best artist. I'm never going to be a top 2 artist. I'm never going to be the best writer. I'm never going to be some fanfare writer. But I kept saying to myself, I want to be unique enough in my art and unique enough in my writing to be unique enough for people to want to come find me. And I feel like that's what a lot of indie comics is doing right now, or especially among, not just the LKC group, but LKC Adjacent, the other groups, Band of Bards, Wingless Comics. I'm stifled on some of the other creators right now, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many interesting things out there.
Everybody's fighting to find their own voice, and yeah.
But I think we all have interesting enough voices that it's creating something. It's creating a trend. Obviously, look at how popular Kickstarter is now. It's so popular now that the top 2 are coming in.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
totally. They're coming in to shoulder us out at this thing that we all built.
And I don't think they're really even. I don't think a lot of them even realize what they're doing.
No, they don't.
No,
they
probably
don't.
not.
Because honestly, most of the guys I've talked to, they wouldn't in a million years do that if they realized what they were doing. As we get this show bigger and I'm able to bring some of them on, I'm gonna ask them. Hey, you're pushing us out, man.
Yeah, I totally think that's fair. But
Brandon, why give your money to Kickstarter when you don't have to? Why push us out? And you're giving away money to Kickstarter. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, Brandon, I really love what you said about, like, all the different indie creators and having those kind of unique voices and whatnot. And I think that, Kickstarter, I think it used to totally be that kind of place where you could jump on there and you could see all the variety of different voices. And now, it's, I'm not saying it's not there, because it is still kind of there, but it's so much harder to find.
It is.
And so now I think that, like,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Jay.
It's all good. I think that, like, Comic Cons are becoming, especially cons that are more geared towards like artists and comics creators, are those places now to go and find. You want to find the indie voices, you want to find that stuff. It's harder to find it online. You got to go back to the physical stuff, and the cons are where you do that. I think that there are a couple of good shops across the country that that you could go into and find some good indie titles at indie, not Image being the standard of indie.
Images,
Right?
I put them in the same category as the big two.
It is.
Now.
It's the top three, right? It's those three, and so for those the indie creators, it's like cons. That's where you get to come and you get to see the breadth of the diversity in the comics field, who's making the different kinds of stuff. And I mean, cons have their own ups and downs, right? You're also competing for other people as the creator. You're competing against people who are there to hawk toys.
Stars now. I mean,
and totally.
That's become a big thing. Yeah, because
your
they
celebrity.
they realize the stars of the draw. They're automatically going to get butts in there just to see the stars. So they're going to try and get well, I'm gonna get the cast of Terminator in here. Everybody loves to see them, or I'm gonna get the cast of whatever, And the artists, I noticed that my first show, so I can't judge a lot, but I was at Fan Expo in New Orleans. First show, only show so far, but the big day, that's Saturday, man. Oh my God, dude, there was well over a couple 100,000 people come through there. And I mean, they were going straight to the stars, dude. They were passing up the big. I mean, I was looking at all the big names. They were literally sitting just across the way from me. That little, they were right in front of Artist Alley. You had your big names all lined up in one row, and then you had the stars, and they were passing those guys up just like they were passing me up to go to the star.
Totally. And I mean, I think that again, it's why I think all cons aren't created equal by any means, right? I think that there are the cons and stuff like that are going to be more conducive to not just sales but interactions with your audience, the people you want to be getting your books into the hands of, or you're putting your art in front of of certain people and whatnot. And the people that are there for those crowds of to see the cast of Terminator or whatever the case may be, that's probably not your target audience. And so those cons that are here's our celebrity guest list anymore, I'm like, man, I'm gonna apply to a smaller one that's even a 1 day con that is something that's geared towards specifically just comics. That's not we're doing resales of toys. It's no, something that's just for creators. I'm super excited. I'm doing this con it's in its second year now. This weekend I'm going to Denver it's called DCAF. So it's the Denver Comics and Arts Festival. And I think it from what I've seen of it in its past year that it did it looks like it's going to be a really good con, and it's geared towards indie creators and not just the kind of, I guess, quote unquote nerd culture kind of stuff. It's more about the specific medium of comics, and so I'm stoked. I'm really excited to.
I got somebody
to check it out.
You probably know him, Matt Campbell, that does Mythica. He's probably going to be there.
Cool.
If you see him, tell him Jerry Cooley says hi. But I'm pretty sure Matt will be there. He's he's working on his next book. He's apparently he hasn't seen the writing on the wall with Kickstarter, because I think he's going to Kickstarter with this one too.
It's okay.
What are your guys' thoughts? You said Zoop, wasn't it, Brandon?
I was just more likely
platforms for a minute.
Sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still using Kickstarter for now.
Definitely. I don't want to lose my super backer status.
The what?
I don't want to. I'm
I
in
know.
this. I don't want to lose my super backer status.
Me neither. I'm, you know.
Whatever the fuck that means, man. Yeah.
No. I mean, Kickstarter is still what it is. I hope they realize what is tentative and may end up being a problem. Hopefully, it's not, and hopefully, it can be what it was before.
Yeah.
I'm like you two. I'm looking forward to see what Lesser Known Comics does with our website and how we can build that with Comics Wellspring and create a new kind of store home for indie creators where we create our own books. That is, I'm fully on board for that, and I may be in my last Kickstarter after this one. The early bird may be my last one, and I'm just I'm looking forward to what Lesser Known Comics can do, what Mark has planned, and Comics Wellspring. Zoop, I'm interested in what they have. I know I've seen a lot of interesting creators there. You have to apply, whatever that means, and submit for at Zoop. I'm interested to see what they do. I don't know where things lie. I'm right now, like I said, I'm on my last legs with Kickstarter. I think this is my last one, and I want to go full throttle in 2025 with Lesser Known Comics, and I want to help build that. I like being there on the ground floor. We're all three of us are there on the ground floor, and I have a feeling it's going to be. I think it can be something interesting because there is a need for a new distribution model.
Definitely.
And there's been a need for
totally
20
agree
years.
with that.
Been a need for 20 years, and I like what Mark and the crew are saying, and I think it can be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Very good point. I mean, Mark and Brandon both. I mean, they're extremely savvy when it comes to this stuff. They got some really great ideas, especially Mark. Mark single-handedly wrote me into this thing. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Because everything that comes out of his mouth, it's just he is comics. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know what I'm saying. The guy he loves this stuff.
Wait, Jerry. Jerry, you got an invitation? Did you get an invitation?
I got an invitation.
I kind of just showed up.
Me and Mark talked for a long time. I remember he hit me up when he first started Lesser Known. I was like, no, I'm good. But I said, I'll support you. I love what you're doing, man. And I always have. I mean, Mark is straight as it comes. There's no hidden agendas. There's none of the bullshit. I mean, he radiates comics, and I'm behind that 100%. I love what we've all managed to build here, this community that we have, where we just kind of bounce off of each other and we pick each other up when we're down and we kick back and bullshit. That's, I mean, we've talked about this before, when you get in your own head, you kind of feel like you're on an island when you're working on a book. And we're not. We've got all kind of resources that are just a text away. Everybody's been through some of the same issues, and some of us have conquered them and some of us haven't, but we can kind of guide each other through it together, and I love that.
I've become a 10 times better creator because of being part of that group.
God, yeah, we all have, I mean, because we feed off each other.
We do. I think that's a good point. Yeah, the feeding off each other is a really good one, and like, I don't know. I'm of the mind that every once in a while a little bit of healthy competition goes a long way to like really improve your shit. And I think there's there's a couple of creators in the mix that I'm just like, I see one of their books and I'm like, oh, look at this thing. It looks so freaking good. And I'm just like, okay, next book, I gotta jump this stuff up.
Every time I see one of their books, these two guys. Like,
Thanks,
fuck, what am I doing?
man.
You're so full of it.
I'm dead serious, man. Dead serious. I draw scratchy, sketchy shit. I don't have
You
those
do
big,
not.
bold, beautiful lines. I
No,
don't.
but you have amazing scenery, and your placement of your characters are
True.
perfect. It
I
really is.
appreciate that,
I mean,
Dave.
that
I
setting,
work
I wish I could
hard
draw
on my
that.
backgrounds. Yeah.
Oh no, but your characters are perfect in the background, like, and they're constantly doing something, which is perfect.
Yeah. That's one thing I've really tried to push. I don't want that I don't ever want them to look static. You know, I
You want to
always
keep
want to
movement.
portray that movement, you know. Yeah.
I'm like, not to just keep shitting on the big two, but I'm going to shit on the big two.
Go for it. Shit all over me.
Like I picked up a random copy of X-Men, recently, and I was going through it and whatnot. The amount of times that characters are just standing around talking in those books, and it's so freaking boring. Not saying that like you've got to action all the time, but it's like, but like a story isn't just like, let me tell you how I feel. It's like, just do something that shows,
Don't tell me,
these
show me.
emotions. Yeah. And all these guys have forgotten that, that don't tell, show model
And
of
we can blame this. All goes back to
What are you gonna say?
oh
Are you
my
gonna say
god, and
Bendis? Are you gonna say
Bendis,
Bendis?
Brian Michael Bendis, and he did it on a bet. They bet him. It was a bet, and I can't remember which creator it was. Said he couldn't sell a book that was like a sitcom where there was absolutely no action in the whole issue. I can't remember the issue, but you can Google it, where they're just sitting around like a damn sitcom the whole issue, just a bunch of talking heads, and it
Mhm.
sold like gangbusters. And here we are. It's become a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Off
that's
of
a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think that like again, it doesn't have to be action, but I think that there are ways of like telling stories in intriguing ways. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I really love a lot of like, I read a lot of like memoir comics and stuff like that that are like, about people's childhood or whatever. I read a little bit of everything in terms of
me
comics,
too.
from nonfiction to I mean, obviously, yes, horror, but
Yeah,
push beyond that every once in a while. And even in those, like, there's interesting visual storytelling that's happening. I'm like, yeah, you can take just a conversation around a coffee table and make that visually compelling in
yeah.
comics. But like, it's you pick up an issue of those big two, it ain't happening, man. It ain't
Do what this
happening.
guy does with all those crazy perspectives and angles, and I mean,
Totally.
you wrote
Yeah.
me in immediately.
Do you know who, like, when you talk about like normal conversation, like just having a conversation where you have to, because you do have conversations in normal life. So if you're going to do it in a story or in a comic, how do you
Yeah,
do it in an interesting way? I will sometimes do a stupid perspective.
it's not stupid, my friend. It's incredible what you do with perspective.
Thank you, Jerry. Aaron Sorkin, though, you ever hear about his walk and talk? How he had to figure out a way to convey. Sorkin, right?
Yeah,
Okay, that he does a lot of his movies. There's not a lot going on, but they're constantly moving. He does the
right.
walk and talk because if you're moving while you're conveying information, then the audience feels like the story is moving forward. So if you can have
Yeah.
movement in your panels while you're conveying information or a conversation, you can have them walking, you can have them, you can do
Exactly.
like a low angle shot of their feet or something like that. You can still convey the information, but you can convey movement also while conveying the information. It's Sorkin gave me, like, when I first saw Sorkin's, because I never watched The West Wing, but when I saw his films, I was just like, oh, that's interesting. The walk and talk is really interesting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a way to get like exposition out, but also move the story forward, is to keep your characters moving too. Another thing I picked up on, I used to do photography, and one of my favorite photographers was Gary Winogrand. He was a social documentarian, and the things he would walk around New York City and just go snapping pictures like this with a camera,
Yeah,
and it was before digital, so he would wind with one finger and snap, and he wouldn't even look. He would just take pictures. And a lot of the pictures, he would then go through all the film, and you'd see pictures, and he would print these up of like people in the middle of conversation. It would be like this. You know, talk, their eyes are closed, their hands are making gestures, they're pointing, they're half, you know, their hands are limp as they're walking. There's a lot of that movement, and I studied this photographer a lot. And I try, if you look at like my comics, you'll see a limp wrist or an eye closed as they're talking, or I do a lot of this, like hand motions, you know, like, oh my God, you know, that kind of stuff. And these are all ways that to make a conversation interesting. You can have no action in your book, but you can still make the panels dynamic and interesting. Sorry, I just went off on a whole.
No, that's great. I love hearing that about like your process and like where those influences are coming in, and it's not just comics. I think that sometimes, you know, comics can be a little bit of like the snake that ate itself. And it's like if you're just, you know, doing the input that's like, it's just comics. And I think that's why I end up turning to movies so much. But, you know, I also, you know, like I'm an educator in the arts. And so I have like a pretty big arts background of like painting and composition and all that kind of stuff. And so I pull in, you know, a lot of that stuff as well. And so I think that if you bring in more resources for good storytelling, wherever it comes from, I think it's going to ultimately improve the comics, especially if they're outside of comics, because I think that's like just adding new fuel into it instead of just, again, regurgitating. It's like, oh, I've seen that panel and I saw that panel in Captain America 1 or whatever, right? It's just like, no, instead it's like, oh yeah, that really reminds me of like Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. How many times has that been, you know, reused, right? And stuff like that I think is way more engaging to the viewer if you can, you know, tie in these different kind of like visual cues.
Jerry, you're on this side of me. Okay. Jerry's this guy's his variant cover, the Sunday Post.
Oh, yeah.
I love them. The Saturday Post, the Rockwell
Saturday Post.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was did you draw that, Jerry?
Yeah, I did all
that.
That
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Those
Thank you, sir.
And you like where you're getting your inspiration is just like freaking mind blowing. Speaking of like, you know, just pulling not just out of comics, but from other
inspiration comes from everywhere. You know, it's all around us. You know, artists grab from everything. And I hate to cut it short, but I've only got an hour of recording, so I'm gonna have to kill it right here.
Yeah.
But I would definitely have these guys on again. Hey, look down in the links, jump on it right now. It's a Horror Show presents The Early Bird. Get on that right now and go to LK's. Go ahead.
And the anthology.
Yes, in the anthology is coming down the pike. And go to lesserknowncomics.com. Check out these guys' books, man. You will not be sorry. I'm going to have all the links down here in the description. Hey, awesome conversation. Thank you guys as always. It's awesome to hang out with you, both of you guys. Love you, brothers. That's the show. That's a wrap. Till next time.